And finally, let's talk about Róisín Murphy, the singer-songwriter, former frontwoman of Moloko, if people remember that, or them from the 90s. She recently posted on a private Facebook post about puberty blockers. She said that they were fucked, absolutely desolate and dangerous to vulnerable children. And for this, essentially, her record label have reportedly stopped promoting her album. She's had gigs cancelled, and of course, she's had the usual torrents of online abuse, as we've now come to expect. Paul, this seems like a particularly cruel example of cancel culture. I mean, it's going to be very difficult for people to deny that is a problem now, I think.
Well, I thought the people who protest against the likes of Murphy were actually against conversion therapy, but it seems that they're actually in favour when it comes to the ideology and thought crime. It seems they're in favour of conversion therapy. They see that, as far as they're concerned, she has blasphemed, and it cannot stand, and something has to be done, and she has to be hounded, and she has to be browbeaten into apologising and donning sackcloth and ashes and recognising her faults and taking a vow of silence or whatever it is she's promised to do. And I really despair, because I long for the day where somebody says something like Murphy says, which seems to be quite sensible as far as I was concerned. All right, it was pretty fruity language, but quite sensible. And then when the storm of abuse comes from albeit a small minority, but nonetheless a storm of abuse, they say, do you know what? I couldn't care less. I'm not going to apologise. I'm not going to back down. I believe in what I said. I'm going to stand by it, and I'm prepared to take on all comers. So, suck that up, basically. And nobody really does. And I think if somebody did do that, they would garner a lot of respect from, mainstream society out there, most of which is not on board with some of this kind of crackpot stuff. And the other thing I would say is, look, an apology is never good enough for these people. Yeah. It's a little bit of red meat to them, but they want more, and they will always come back for more and more and more, no matter what you say, no matter what you do, no matter how much you kind of prostrate yourself before them. It isn't going to be good enough for them. So, we need to try to encourage people to stop being petrified and to stop bowing down every time they get a little bit of pressure, because there is a lot of cowardice out there, to be perfectly honest. And we do need people with backbone who are prepared to stand up to this stuff, because they wouldn't be, if they did, they would find very quickly, I think, that they're not in a minority amongst mainstream society, that the majority are with them. And we need a little bit of courage from the likes of Murphy and others who find themselves in that sort of position.
And I think your sort of red meat, or maybe red rag to a bull, that kind of metaphor is really apt, because a lot of the worst has happened to Murphy after she apologised. Now, I don't really want to accuse her of cowardice, because I completely understand the sort of pressure that she would have been under, not only from the deranged people attacking her, but also from
PR people,
the record label, people with the purse strings, unfortunately.
No, and it does seem like, if you think about this particular scandal, if you think about your man Winston Marshall getting kicked out of Mumford & Sons because he liked a book by a conservative author, it feels like you are just not allowed to be in the mainstream music industry now if you happen to hold gender-critical views, mildly conservative views, if you happen just to believe, on this issue is a good example, along with the vast majority of people in this country, in America and elsewhere, that it's a terrible idea to be subjecting children to unevidenced and potentially very, very dangerous therapies. That's the thing about her comments, is that they were correct. And it's not as if that whether being right in any kind of sense is your path to freedom of speech or not. But on this, she's absolutely correct. She's correct on the facts. In terms of puberty blockers, the CAS review in this country, the interim CAS review pointing out that they were just... There was no evidence as to their kind of safety in the long term. The NHS has recently, I think, limited it only where children are concerned to clinical trials. The Nordic countries have rowed back on these sorts of treatments because of the fact that they seem to put children on an irreversible pathway towards cross-sex hormones. What that can mean is a lifelong of pain, regrets, sterility. And so the person who's standing up with what is both the kind of evidence-based view, if you like, and also I think the morally unimpeachable view that what we have been subjecting confused young people to, often autistic, often struggling with their sexuality, is both wrong and morally abhorrent, is the person who's hounded out of society. There's no better example of how topsy-turvy and upside down the kind of cultural elites are then in a case like this, I think the person who's standing up and saying we shouldn't sterilise confused kids, as all these experts have been saying, is the witch. How did that happen?
You're right. I mean, it should be the people who are pushing the kids to be sterilised, so you should be the ones facing the opprobrium. I mean, I don't want them to be cancelled. They should absolutely be able to say their view, but you think that's where the anger should be directed at, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I just, what makes me laugh is the same people who are so quick to say, you know, we must follow the science when it comes to COVID, to masks, to lockdown, to the environment, climate change. You know, we have to follow the science. All of a sudden, when it comes to this issue, they kind of say, well, you know, don't come up with those scientific arguments. We're not really interested. You've got to be kind.
Yeah.
You know, so they elevate feelings over facts when in any other debate they wouldn't do that. And I just think that why should women continually have to put up with their identity being appropriated in a way that we would never stand for any other identity? You know, we wouldn't. But when it comes to women, we say they're fair game. But I also sense that they're not going to be defeated. The gender critical movement, I think, has got so much confidence now.
Yeah.
3 or 4 years ago, I think people were dipping their toe in the water very tentatively because they were worried about getting their head shot off, if I can mix my metaphors. But nowadays, I think because there is that swell, and you know, people are prepared to take to the barricades over it, I think that's given people confidence. And when you see some of the passion and the people involved in defending women's sex-based rights, then you think they're not going to be beaten. You know, it may take a while. And you occasionally lose the odd battle, but they're not going to be beaten. And you know, full power to them, because I think they're doing everybody, women and girls across society, they're doing a great service to these campaigners.